So we're going to be giving out some stuff to people who get the questions right, but we're not going to have any favoritism going on. I could just tell you that right now. You got to do your homework. My name is Walker Claridge. I'm one of the owners of Broadway Brewery in Columbia, Missouri. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brewery at first, and then we'll start getting into the beers. The brewery's been around since 2009. It got started with myself and Paul Dickerson, our brewmaster, who will not be here tonight. But he and I started the brewery. We started planning it back in 2007. It took us a couple years to get it going. And our relationship goes way back to home brewing, like all brewers. And we started out in our garages and slash businesses making beer in small batches, and then eventually got into larger batches, and then obviously got into a brewery. But when I met Paul, I owned a local grocery store in Columbia, Missouri called Root Cellar. It was a store that was painfully ahead of its time and only sold local stuff from around the hillsides, food and whatnot. And Paul's wife was an avid shopper of local food and had come in one day and said, "You should meet my husband. He's a home brewer, and I think you guys would get along really well." I said, "Well, I've always wanted to brew my own beer, so yeah, we should meet." So Paul comes in, and I said to him, I have these catalogs here. I can get us a kit, and we can do a beer. And Paul just started laughing at me like, "Oh, no. We do not brew from kits. We only brew from grain." So he came over that week, and he brought all the stuff, and we did an all-grain beer. And I never have brewed from a kit. So he started me off the right way, straight from the grain, and we've been best friends ever since. So we got the brewery open in 2009. We basically spent a couple years remodeling a basement in downtown Columbia. Paul and I put it together pretty much ourselves in nights and weekends, and ran all the glycol, ran all the lines, totally remodeled the entire place, gutted it down to the studs, and rebuilt it back from scratch. And Paul is a master carpenter and also a master mind. He's a brain. So, and I'm supposed to be the looks. I don't know what happened, but that's how it all shook out. We brew about 24 styles a year down there. Has anybody ever been to the brewery, by the way? Wow, great, awesome. So if you've been to the brewery, you have some idea of what it is, but I'm going to tell the rest of you guys. It's basically a farm-to-table restaurant. It's a gastropub that we started kind of out of the Root Cellar, which was my grocery store. So we were working with about 140 different local producers at that time, and the space came open next to the grocery store, and I said to Paul, we should start a brewery in there, and he laughed at me again, and then I began building a business plan and kept talking to him about it. And I think at one point he said, "You're really serious about this brewery thing, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am really serious about this." So we got the brew system out of Herman, which was a brew system that came out of Tampa. It's a pub system, and it had been sitting in the warehouse in Herman. The Tin Mill Brewery is where we kind of bought it from, and they had bought this brewery, and they then had located like a German lager style brewery brew house that came out of California, and it had blown up, and shrapnel doors came off, and it had been decommissioned for 30 years. And the guys over at Tin Mill also own U.S. Bank, so money was no object for them, so they rebuilt that. And then the brew system they had, which is primarily an ale type system, they just sat in a warehouse for like 8 years, and it sat there. And then we eventually found out that they had it, and we bought it. But we looked for a brew system for 6-8 months and just couldn't find one. We couldn't find any available, and that just lets you know about the revolution of craft beer that's happening. There just wasn't any available. Building one and shipping it to us was about a year out, so we weren't really into that. We wanted to get going. So again, the brewery is a gastropub. If you ever get a chance to get down there, it's a 7-barrel system. We have 3 fermenters and 5 bright tanks. And when it gets low, we keg off, so we're able to keep about 14 beers on tap. We also make a local organic cider from Dan Kelly in Canton, Missouri. He sells at the Schlafly Market. That's also my farmer's market where I sell vegetables. I am a vegetable grower, and we bring a lot of those vegetables into the brewery. One of the other 4 owners at the brewery is also a vegetable grower, and he brings his vegetables into the brewery. So it's the kind of place you want to go to. All of our meats come from single-sourced farms. So the beef is American Kobe out of Westphalia from the Nooner Farm. All of our chicken comes from Luttrell, which is a certified organic chicken farm that has a great thing going on there. They grow the chickens, they grow the feed, and they also have their own processing facility on farm. So those chickens never even leave the farm before they come to the brewery. It's quite progressive style of raising chicken. And I grow the lamb, and we get bison from KC, but it's really a place where you can go and you can know where all your food comes from, local cheeses and everything. It's quite the place to visit. So I encourage everybody to get down there. Like I said, it's in between 8th and 9th Street. I think you guys would have a wonderful time if you came down and visit us. So it's a 7-barrel system. Obviously, that's a pretty small system. That's what I would classify nowadays as a nano brewery, because it's not even a microbrewery. And then there's like Sam Adams, which is supposed to be a craft brewery, but they're huge, you know. So I've been coining this term a long time ago as a nano brewery for really small breweries, 7 barrels and under. That wasn't obviously a big enough system for us to bring beer out and sell to the general public, other bars and restaurants. So we, I guess it was about 2 or 3 years ago, started working on a new brewery. And we located that one on the bluffs at Roachport. So if you guys are passing Columbia and you are about to hit the Missouri River, the last exit right before you go over the river is Roachport. And we're right off to the right. You can see it right there on the corner of the highway of I-70 and BB, the Roachport exit. So we took the old Les Bourgeois winery, which is a beautiful old winery, and they built a new winery down the hill. And the old winery was open, so we moved in there. We rent from Les Bourgeois, and we built a new brewery in there. It's basically, we do 30-barrel batches out of there, and that allowed us to get into the distribution of beer game. So we're in the middle of building a brand new tasting room in Roachport. It's almost done. It's going to be a beautiful thing because in that location we have wine getting made. Les Bourgeois makes a ton of wine there, all different styles from dry to sweet, red and white. We also have the brewery, our brewery, which is located in that same corner. And we also have a distillery that just opened up. So there's a couple of things that are getting produced out of there. We're working on, there's a rum that's already on the market. And we also have some whiskey getting in barrels sitting around right now. And one of the interesting things that we're doing out there with that is when you make whiskey or any spirit, really, what you essentially do is make a dirty mash. You grind the barley or corn or whatever it is that you're working with, and you let it ferment in with all the stuff, and then you drain that off and distill it. Well, what we're actually doing is making beer first and then moving it over to the still. So it's not fermenting with the stuff on it. And I feel like what we're coming up with is some spirits that have some amazing clear quality to them. And that's going to be years down the road. But it's just going to be a really nice stop as you're driving to Kansas City or across the country or wherever you're heading. Pull off the road, give us a visit, check out the tasting room. It should be a really nice time. Stretch your legs out. So I guess everybody by now has our first beer tonight, which is our. So the first beer that we have here is the organic honey wheat. We call this the organic honey wheat because it is the first beer that we brewed using all organic grain. And now we brew all the beers with organic grain, but we still only call this the organic honey wheat. And we didn't necessarily want to become an organic brewery or like source everything organic, including the hops and everything else. It's just a philosophy that we agree with, growing grain organically, especially barley. It's not that hard to grow it in the right environment organic. So we kind of made a switch. The only beer we really don't use organic grains on is the porter. And when I say organic grains, we use organic wheat, we use organic barley, base malt. So any of our adjuncts, we just buy regular. But lion's share of all the beers now are actually made with organic grain. But this one was the first one that we did it with, and so it worked out well, and so we kept the name Organic Honey Wheat on it. The other thing that's really nice about this beer is it has another local organic quality to it. It's got honey in it from the Bonfim honey farm. When I had Broadway Brewery, there was a beekeeper. His name's Jacques Laboyle. He's a French beekeeper, and I bought honey from him for all the time I had the grocery store. So when it came time to make a beer made out of honey, I sourced it from Jacques. So this beer actually, when we're brewing it, we make it. It's a 50-50 beer. It's 50 wheat, 50 barley, mostly light, all light base malt for the most part. And then we get 120 pounds of honey from Jacques Laboyle. And what that looks like is 10 gallons, so 2 5-gallon pails of honey, which is a lot of honey to be thrown into a beer. Most honey beers are made with what they call honey malt, which is high fructose corn syrup, drizzled over malt and then dried back out. But we did not want to go that route, so we just got local honey, which makes the beer a lot more expensive to make, but we feel like what we get out of it is worth it. So 120 pounds of honey goes into the boil kettle at the kill. So we'll kill the heat off of it, we'll let it settle down, we'll dump the honey in, dissipates into the wort, and then we move that over the fermenter, we pitch the yeast, and it goes crazy, of course, because it's got all the malt sugars available to it, plus it's got all the honey sugars available to it. And then we throw in a pretty aggressive California yeast, and we're going to dry it out to about a half a brick of sugar. So the beer gets back to a dry point, even though we put a lot of honey into it. And what we feel like you get out of that is, I mean, really the beer is actually a part mead in that aspect, but also what you get is the background flavors of the honey. So it really isolates what the bees were enjoying at that time for nectar. So the beer does change just a little bit from time to time depending on the honey and where it comes from. Sometimes it's clover, sometimes it's wildflower, and occasionally there's quite a bit of black locust in it, and that comes out in the spring, so we actually get it about July is about when it's going into the beer. And when you get the black locust, we don't get all black locust honey for it because it would be really overpowering, but sometimes there's some in there, and that will give the beer quite a bit of a different flavor. So if you notice that right in the beginning of summer, that's what it is. So it's a seasonal beer. It changes seasonally, but you should get some herbaceous and floral notes on the back end of this. And it's our light style beer, basically. It fits a lot of categories for us. It's our light beer that you drink in the summer when it's hot, lawnmower beer, whatever you want to call it. It does have 6% alcohol in it, so it's pretty sturdy. And people who don't like wheat beers will typically enjoy this beer because it isn't weedy. It doesn't have a whole lot of weedy, and something goes on there with the honey and everything that happens with it that cleans it up and doesn't make it so weedy. And then it's also light and dry, so it's kind of a misnomer. A lot of people see it on tap, honey wheat. Ooh, I'm scared of that. It might be sweet, but it's actually a light, dry style. This is really lightly hopped. I wish MJ was here to refer to this because I'm not so up on the hops on this one, but I know we're using American hops in there. For some reason, I want to say that we do it with the Cascade hops. I believe that's the hops, and I believe it's from the Cascade. We'll ask MJ when he gets here. He'll be here really soon, I hope, because it's been a while since I brewed any beer. I got to be honest about that. But anyway, enjoy this one, and we start out nice and easy with this one, and we're going to hit you with a lot more flavor here in the end. Yeah, this beer, when it's ice cold coming out of the tap, I have a tendency to think like it doesn't have a whole lot of flavor. But as it warms up in your hand, the flavors really come out, especially the honey. It's got that background herbaceous floral notes. I think those come out a lot better once it gets warm. It's not the kind of beer you like to drink warm, but that's one quality about it that happens with it.
I have a question. Did you say the name of your shop was Root Cellar? Is that what you said?
Root Cellar was my grocery store. I actually sold that in 2011 or 2012.
So is there any connection to the Root Cellar's root beer?
No, there is a connection to Root Cellar's root beer, which is that our distributor up in St. Louis now is Summit, and Root Cellar is also distributed by Summit, and Root Cellar is also located in Columbia, Missouri, and we are also located in Columbia, Missouri. So there, we do have a lot in common, but we are not owned by myself. Unfortunately, that thing took off, didn't it? Any other questions about the honey wheat? All right.
So what size did you say that your system is right now?
We brew in a 15-barrel system. We double batch into 30-barrel fermenters. So it's a two-turn into the fermenters, and then we do a beer called the Double Rye IPA, which is kind of our flagship imperial beer. It is a rye. It's a 30% rye beer. It's a really balanced IPA. If you guys ever get a chance to drink the Double Rye IPA, I think you'll be really pleased. It's really got three things going on in it. It's 30% rye, so you get a nice spicy note from the rye. It's a four-turn mash for us, so there's double the malt in that beer that would be in any of our other beers. It's got 10% alcohol, but you don't taste it, and it's also got 111 IBUs. So it's got a ton of hops in it, but you also wouldn't know it. So if you ever get a chance to drink it and realize that what you're really tasting is the culmination of three very powerful ingredients. Your hops are, 111 IBUs in a regular beer would not be palatable. The 30% rye in a beer I think also would be over the top, and then 10% alcohol can be over the top in the wrong beer too. But you put all these three things together, they work off each other really well. It's kind of like a tripod of a great beer, and it stands pretty sturdy. Michael, before you get settled in too much, what are the hops that we're using there in the honey wheat?
Honey wheat's bittered with Northern Brewer,
Mm-hmm.
and the aroma additions Cascade.
Mm-hmm. See, so I was partially right.
A lot of the craft lighter beers they have are pretty carbonated. This one was not. What was the thought process of that?
Well, it can be really carbonated, but what we're really trying to do there is give you something that you can taste. It can be more carbonated than it is. I think that depends on the pressure that it's under on the system that is pouring it, and but I also think that the less carbonation for this beer also lets some of the other flavors come through. So, yeah. Any other questions on the honey wheat? Anybody have any questions about honey or anything like that? Which is it's a major component in the beer, and I feel like it works really, really well in there. No? Okay. Well, then I guess that makes it free for me to be able to tell a joke, right? Okay, so the guy wants to eat at this restaurant. And he's really wanting to eat there. He's been wanting to eat there for a long time, and he drives quite a ways in to eat there. And he gets there, and it's a nice place. He walks in the front door. Maitre D's standing there, and says, "Can I help you?" He said, "Yeah, I'd like to get a table for one." He's from out in the country. And the maitre d' says, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, but you're going to have a tie to eat in this establishment. We have a dress code here." "Ooh, man, I drove a long ways. Are you sure?" "No, it's a very strict dress code, sir, and you're going to have a tie." So the guy goes out to his car, and he looks in the front seat. There's nothing in the front seat. He looks in the back seat. Nothing in the back seat. pops open the trunk, finds a pair of jumper cables there. So he puts those around his neck, ties them up, walks back in, goes up to the Major D and says, "I'd like to get a table for one." Major D looks at him and says, "Okay, let's get started." That's always the response I get. First booze and then clapping, so it's consistent. I like that. Tonight's evening, Michael Ivancic, this is our head brewer. He brews almost all the beer that we make down at the brewery. Native St. Louis, actually native to U City. So he's a U City boy, born and bred. U City guy right here. And so he brews all the beer. He's got his fingerprint on everything that we do. Our IPA, the 11-point IPA, which I think is one of the more balanced IPAs on the market right now, is kind of his baby. So if you ever get a chance, try that one as well. And do you want to say anything about the honey wheat? I told him about the honey that's in it. I told him about the kill, and I told him about the 6% alcohol.
I mean, I missed what you did, so I don't, I don't know what.
In the summer, it's the bane of his existence because it's every other
Yeah.
beer. It's all the time. And he doesn't get to brew some of the other styles that he wants to get in there because it's just on him all the time really hard. So it'll slow down this time of year, but it's definitely a great beer. And so are we ready? Are we passed out here? Not passed out, but passed out. So we're going to move on to the Cherry Saison, which is our seasonal beer right now. We get the Saison DuPont yeast from Perennial. Anybody heard of Perennial? I'll bet. So good friends of ours. What can we say about this beer? It gets tart cherries from Michigan. How much tart cherries we put in? From Oregon.
Oregon.
Tart cherries from Oregon.
The production batch got 344 pounds of tart cherries.
That's a lot of
added
cherries.
to it, which I did by hand up and down the ladder by myself, which is a pretty 44 pounds at a time. Saisons were traditionally, as you know, a style brewed in the spring and summer for the farm laborers to drink in the fall. Harkening back to early beer, beer was originally created so that grain could last longer. You know, kind of a carbohydrate, calorie-rich drink. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that might be easier. So Saisons harken way back to the Belgian days of that. Belgian yeast strain, which is an ale strain, gives off fruity esters and other organic compounds as it's going through fermentation that our house ale yeast, which is an American ale, doesn't give those same flavors. We use those flavors to play off kind of the tart cherry flavor. So a lot of the time when people hear us say cherry saison, they're thinking, oh, it's a sweet fruit beer. But Belgian yeast actually dries out a beer a lot, and then we add tart cherry to it. So it's, for a fruit beer, not a very sweet beer. And
That's by intention.
Yeah, it kind of, the fruit flavors start to blur. You're not sure if they're coming from the yeast or from the tart cherry because they're very similar in kind of the aromatic qualities that you get from it. So it's our summer seasonal, always a big hit. This is the first time we've done a big batch, and I think it went pretty well.
Yeah, we always do this down at the pub, and one thing I noticed about this beer that is different from the one we do at the pub, it's always fun to see the difference in the two beers as one gets done on a larger scale and one gets done on a smaller scale. One thing I thought that this beer was that the cherry came through just a touch more, which for me, I don't like as much, but it seems like everybody I talk to, they like it better, or I don't know about better, but they talk about the cherry and how it's just a little bit more pronounced, and I think it is enjoyable to have it come through a little bit more. And I was kind of actually hoping for that because although I like a drier beer, I'm not sure that everybody does. I like drier beers in general, but I thought this turned out excellent. And we, of course, thank Perennial for the yeast, which we actually get the yeast from them like 8 months before this beer is made or 6 months before this is made. And we first grow a batch of yeast out of their yeast. and then we brew a beer out of their beer, and then we brewed another beer out of that yeast. We did a what do we call that? Summer brew.
Yeah, it was a dry hopped wheat Saison.
Dry hopped wheat Saison with a lot of hops, and we called it the summer brew because people would ask us what style of beer. We said it is no style of beer.
Yeah,
it is styleless beer. But it turned out great, and then we took that yeast and we pitched it for this beer. So by this point, it's pretty much our yeast. What do you guys think? Thank you. This will be a beer we brew every year, so you can look for it. It's going to be coming around. There's a lot of beers that we do 24 styles at the pub, and then we get about we'll probably get about 12 out of the brewery a year. Maybe
Hopefully.
we'll push more, maybe in the future, but 12 I think is the next couple years is about what we're going to be able to get out of there. And I guess we should maybe mention what we do. We do a porter, we do a wheat, the honey wheat. We do the 11-point IPA, which is our really well balanced dry hopped with Simcoe IPA. It's got a nice amber quality color to it, so that it's really balanced. And then we do the double rye IPA, and then we also do a kind of our APA series. Our American Ale series is a single hop series. So we do all different kinds of single hops. So we do the same. Why don't you talk about the single hop series and what we do with it?
So the single hop series follows the exact same malt recipe for every beer, which is 90% base malt with just a touch of caramel malt. So it's a really, really pale IPA, up in about the 6.5 range, and we kind of do a bittering about let's say at the pub it's 1.5 pounds for the bittering, 3 pounds for the aroma, and then 7 pounds for the dry hop. And it's the same. The only thing that changes is the strain of hop. So it lets us as well as our customers kind of explore the bittering qualities of a hop, the aroma qualities of the hop, and then the dry hop. And you can really see, a lot of people ask me, well, why don't you keep it the same IBU? Because different hops have different acidic qualities, which changes the IBU on that beer. But to me, that is part of that hop. If we're learning about that hop and it's high in acid, then it should be a much more bitter beer than one that's low in acid. So we've been having a lot of fun with that at the pub.
Yeah.
This summer we released Cascade Single Hop with Hoppiness Farms out of Herman. So there aren't many hop farms in Missouri. As you probably know, it's not the best place to grow them. But one of the few is Hoppiness, and they just did their third harvest. And they're having some success with a few strains, Cascade obviously being the hardy American strain. So this summer we brewed that with them, and I thought it turned out real nice.
It did turn out really nice. A lot of lemon qualities to that. And they actually tested out a little higher on the alpha scale than what they would be getting out of Oregon.
Yeah.
So it was a good harvest for them. And then it was a disastrous year this year for hops. It rained every damn day this year, so it was not hop growing weather. So it wasn't the best year. If that weather would have just moved up a month and a half, it would have been a great year. But they harvest hops in August, and it was still raining in the beginning of August, so it wasn't a good year. It wasn't a typical summer for Missouri, so we're going to have some challenges with growing hops and stuff like that. But the next hop series, the single hop series that we're coming out with is the Chinook.
Yeah, Chinook. I will be brewing that Friday, so it'll be released.
So talk a little bit about that hop and what to expect out of that.
Chinook's more northwestern Canadian hop originally, I think. It's a little higher on the alpha scale than, say, Cascade. It's about 10% alpha acid, which means the bitterness is going to be ramped up. And then it's got some real strong, like resinous pine qualities, kind of almost some funky notes that don't even seem hop-like. It's a very stands alone and sticks out. We did a small batch earlier this year, and it's very different than a lot of the other ones, but also really enjoy it. Kind of like a northwestern IPA almost.
This is a beer drinker's beer. The Chinook single hop is a beer drinker's beer. And I'm a big beer drinker, obviously. The first time I drank that beer, you almost take a step back and you're like, what the hell is that? And then you start drinking a little bit more, you start drinking a little bit more. By the end of the batch, I was crying that it was going to be gone because I had gotten my taste buds wrapped around that beer so much that I was just like, I'm in love with this beer. And our customers were the same place. At first, they didn't know what to think about it. By the time they drank it a couple times, they were coming in every night to drink it because they wanted it. And I think the production batch is going to highlight the hop just a little bit more. And I think that if you guys get a chance to try it, I think that you have to finish the whole beer before you make any judgment on it, and then drink another one, and then drink another one. At least 3. Then make a judgment.
Where did you say that hoppiness farm is?
It's really actually fairly close to I-70 at the Herman New Haven exit. So it's kind of in between Herman, New Haven, and they started out with a half acre and they've expanded to 4 acres. And I don't know if they got as much off of 4 acres as they did off a half acre this year. It was a rough year, but it's a rhizome, so it's going to come back next year. And if we get a regular growing season, I think we're going to get, we're going to have our great seasons with that, and then we're going to have our not so great seasons with that.
When are you adding the
Cherries
cherries?
are added.
They are post fermentation. So I let the yeast dry it out. It's still a pale yellow beer. And then I drop the temp a little to start shutting that yeast down because that cherries is going to add a little bit of sugar and then it's going to re-ferment.
Which it does a little bit.
It does a little bit. But usually the beer is completely dry and then I add the cherries and that kind of brings it back up to it not being bone
It's a
dry.
5.6 ABV on it, so it doesn't get too high, but that's a little higher than a lot of Saisons, I think. I forgot what I was going to say, which happens quite often. Well, a little bit about the philosophy of our brewery, overarching. And you may want to correct me on this, 'cause I may have perceptions about it that aren't true.
Okay.
But what we're really going for with all the beers are beers. If you hear what the beer is and you're like, oh, I like that, hopefully what you get is the philosophy that we're going for, which is very sturdy, very flavorful beers that are very true to their style, but don't go overboard. And we want to stay within the confines of what the beer should be. We definitely want to be on the leading edge of flavor, but we don't want to overdo it. So with our porter, we'll talk about that when it comes out, but we want it to be rich. We call it a robust porter. We want it to be rich and full, but we don't want it to go over that line into on the back of your throat bitter. I've had one. I'm done with this beer. Same thing with the honey wheat. It's a honey wheat, but it's balanced. It's not sweet. Cherry Saison, we're going to add cherries, but we're not going to overdo it. We're going to make it light cherry. We're going to make it effervescent. We're going to make it nice, but we're not going to give you a ton of bananas. So that's the IPA, same thing. We do that with the IPAs. And we really have 2 super strong IPAs. We have the 11-point IPA, which is an amber in color, 68 IBUs. You should taste it. You should think of it when you're drinking it. This is a well-balanced IPA. You can look at it. It's got an amber color. It's obviously got a lot of malt coloring in it, but you shouldn't taste it as a malty beer. It should predominantly be a hoppy beer, and it's a Simcoe hop, which is awesome hop. And then the double rye, which I've already talked about, a really well-balanced 3-tier beer. So we try and make really sturdy, true to their style beers that are drinkable. Let's say that. Oh, we got another beer. Did you say there's 2 of these classes? On to the porter. You want to talk a little about the porter?
The porter, so originally an English style, I guess we would go. The original porter, what it would have been back in the day, would have been a kind of malty, bland, real mild beer. I think what Americans have done is we've taken it, as Walker said, and made it a robust porter. So the flavors are bigger, they're bolder. You know, we have a lot of notes of coffee, bitter dark chocolate from highly, highly kilned malts. And we are using an English base malt on it, which bumps up the original gravity or the sugar content before it's fermented. And then that drops a lot, bringing the porter up to about 6, but we still leave more residual sugar behind, giving it that body to back up those malts. Because if we dried it out, then those dark roasted malts would be acrid, and like Walker said, you wouldn't want more than one. It'd be really kind of offensive and bitter, but that balance with the sweetness and residual body that's left in the beer really makes it palatable to drink such a robust porter over and over again.
And it's called porter. Yeah. The imagination phase is going to be after we get through this next phase. Now, actually, our philosophy on it is that right now we're an on-tap brewery. So when we go into a market, we put it on tap, and people drink it. And then whenever we put it into bottles and package it and try and sell it to you, then we're going to mesmerize you with all kinds of things like dogs and frisbees and bikes and all that stuff that everybody wants to make them buy things with. But when you're going up and you're looking at the tap system and you see Art and Neurosis, you're like, what is that? And you don't know until you drink it, and you're like, this is awesome. I don't know if anybody's had Art and Neurosis. I think it's an awesome beer. But I know I should have picked another Summit beer. Sorry about that. So when people walk up to the tap, what they're going to see is our tap handles, which look like this and this. And they're going to see, oh, that's Broadway Brewery. They got the holes there and this, and then they got the logo up here. That's Broadway Brewery. What Broadway Brewery beer is it? It's the IPA. It's the double rye IPA, or it's the porter. So not trying to overcomplicate things in the beginning, trying to get people familiar with the beer. When we go to packaging, we've got names for the beers. The porter's tentatively going to be called the Cultivator Porter. Do not let that out of this room. Oh, the wooden handles? That's actually a pretty good story. So this guy came in. I wasn't sure if he was homeless or not, but he said, hey, I've got these tap handles. I wish I had one of the original ones to show you. But he had these tap handles, and he was like, if I give you this tap handle, will you let me drink here for a little while? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's a cool tap handle. I think we could probably work something out. And so I took his tap handle and I put it on, and the original ones looked a little bit more like this, where they were square, but they had a lot more holes in them, and he used different sized drill bits, and they were really cool. If you ever come down to the pub, we've always got them on display, using them as tap handles and stuff. And then, so that went on. He brought us another one. I gave him some more beer. He brought us another one. And he said, I got 40 hours in these things. Each one takes 40 hours. And I was like, well, I don't know if we can work with that. I don't know if I can pay you for 40 hours every time I want to put a beer on tap somewhere. But I talked to the guy. I said, hey, if we could come up with something in between, we can maybe work something out. And well, before that, I told him, hey, we're gonna start another brewery, and we're gonna need a lot of tap handles. And he's like, oh man, I had a vision. That these tap handles, they were all over the country. I saw them everywhere in my dream, and it was awesome. And it's going to be like a conversation starter. Everybody's going to want to know, and I want to make more of these tap handles for you. What would it cost, and what could you pay me per tap handle? So we started talking about it a little bit, and I told him, tap handles, $25, $30 is about all we can really spend on them. We got to come up with something that you can do in that. And then I never saw the guy again. So I never like to let a good vision go. So I contacted one of my old kitchen employees who had gotten into a woodworking shop called Stickman Productions, and talked to him about, hey, what would it take to make tap handles? So we came up with a prototype, and it looked pretty similar to this. And then I said, "How can you do that?" And he said, "I think so." And we bought him a bunch of tools, and now he makes all these for us. So that's how I got started. And then the seasonals are all different. They've all got a live edge to them. They're all different. That's the live edge side of it, where the wood. This is walnut, and this is the live edge. Normally, you just cut that off and throw it away. But all the seasonals, if you see a tap handle with a bunch of holes in it, and it's just a solid piece of wood with a live edge, you know that's our seasonal. And you're probably going to have to ask the bartender, what's the seasonal from Broadway Brewery right now? So that's where the tap handles came from. And then, like I said, when we get into packaging, which is going to be very soon, we're actually looking at bottling lines. Right now we got the one we want picked out, and it's just a matter of convincing everybody that it's a good idea to do it today, which is my idea. I want to do it today. So pretty soon we'll have stuff in bottles, and you guys can buy it all over. That's going to happen really soon. Let's talk a little more about the porter, since we're still drinking it. So obviously sturdy, rich, full-bodied. What are the malts that adjunct malts we put in it? Black Prince.
No Black Prince. Chocolate, roasted barley, patent black, and
Black.
a little bit of caramel 60.
Yeah, so if you look at these malts, I like to always talk about toast when I talk about beer, because you make toast out of grain, and you also make beer out of grain. But if it popped out of your toaster, the malt that this beer is made out of, you throw it in the trash, because it is all burnt up, and you do not want to eat it. But so the key is to get that flavor into the beer, to get that rich, full flavor into the beer without reminding you of burnt toast. So I think we do a pretty good job of it. I really like this beer. It's one of our great beers that we make, and what does everybody think of it, by the way? Excellent.
Everybody has the last beer.
Oh, great.
They're still getting ours, so I think everybody has the Stout.
That's okay.
You guys can start talking about it if you want, just because we're running a little bit late. But yours will be here in just a second.
Sure.
Oh, we got another guest speaker here tonight. Dale, you want to come on up? So the last beer that we're going to have is a coffee stout, and this is Dale from Shortwave. Hey, we got
Hello.
another microphone over here, Mike.
It's funny. I moved to Columbia about 4 years ago. I actually used to live on Clemens.
Hey,
I moved
another
from there.
hometown boy.
Yeah. Well, I moved here for coffee. I moved there for a girl. So.
Okay.
Right.
How'd that work out?
It's good so far.
Okay, good deal.
No, we opened up a roastery in the downtown of Columbia about a year and a half ago, and it's been a fun time. My philosophy for roasting kind of works pretty well with their philosophy for brewing. Like I source seasonally. I look for coffees that are just like they've been picked, they've been harvested, and they've been sent out, and I roast in a way that kind of amplifies. Like it's in kind of the imagery of our logo, Shortwave. Like shortwave radio is something that's sent off in the atmosphere and it bounces, and then somebody catches that signal and they send it off and it bounces. And so the work of any cup of coffee that you've ever had, and pardon my tangent, is that numerous sets of hands have worked with that coffee. And so for me, I get coffees that I roast lightly, light to medium in most everything, so that I can highlight kind of the work of those coffees.
Of the grower, of the
yeah,
harvester.
of the grower, of the terroir. When you're talking about toast, like when we roast coffee, we push it like I go through an initial sort of a drying phase in it, and then I'll push it to what's called first crack, or it's right around 350 to 400, which is where that caramelization happens. Like a good piece of toast, it has that caramelization of the sugars are inherent within it. And so for this coffee, like this is what, our fourth iteration, I think, of the Shortwave Stout-ish. I chose a washed processed Ethiopian from the work at Chile, which is a slight region within the Yirgacheffe area. And the coffee has citrus tone. It has, it's got lots of body to it. It's got some nice sweetness in it. It seems to pair really well with what MJ does. And, oh, is this it? Excellent. Pardon. And every time I send, like, we put together, I'll send him uncut cold brew toddy, and then I think he strings up French press ground coffee in hop socks and steeps it. He can talk more about that part of the process. But he's like, he'll get it, and then I'll get a sample batch in a growler. Like he always swings by and kind of sneaks it there, and then grinningly disappears out the back. I get it, and every time I'm just, get back here, sir. I need to give you a hug. I'm super proud of the work that they do, and I'm glad to be part of it.
And we're super proud of the work that Dale does. And we were definitely going in, trying his coffees and talking to him about his philosophy. I was like, wow, this is like a mirror image of what we're talking about. But talk about how much toddy is in, how much toddy and how much ground is in it.
40 pounds of ground and 12 gallons of uncut
Uncut toddy.
Yeah.
So when you get a toddy at a coffee shop, it's 50-50?
Yeah, typically it's 50-50. Like they'll cut 1-to-1, so it's.
So it might as well be 24 gallons. But you want to talk about the rest of this beer?
Yeah. So the body of the beer is built like a dry or mild stout. So like a low ABV stout, it's only about 4.5%. Much lower than the porter on base malt. And then a lot of the dark malts I have in it are debittered, kind of as Dale focuses on the lighter roasted coffee. Dehusked and debittered dark malts really help you get that color and some of those flavors without being overly acrid or burnt. And then we also have about a 20% addition of flaked barley, which is barley that's just kind of been run over. It looks like oats, it's flat. And what that does is it takes that 4.5% stout and it makes it feel bigger. You know, it gives it that good head. It gives
Body.
it that thick body, exactly. And that body we need to kind of stand up to the flavor of the coffee, which we add post-fermentation. Kind of like the cherries, I drop the temp to shut the yeast down. String up Dale's coffee in a bunch of bags, drop them in the fermenter, and pour that toddy in.
How long
And
does
then-
it sit in those? How long those bags sit in there?
7 to 10 days,
Yeah.
so about a week.
So you really get. There's a lot of caffeine in this beer, right?
There's a fair amount, yeah.
And
We have 40 pounds of ground and 12 gallons of uncut toddy.
that might be a trivia question. And then are we getting short on time?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
Let's say a couple more things. or-
Yeah, I just to finish up a little bit, one more note on the coffee. Dale didn't say it, but should get some wine and berry flavors in on the beginning of this coffee, and that's due to the light roast, bringing out the wine and berry flavors of a light roast coffee. And then one more thing I want to touch on before we cut is that one of the projects that Broadway Brewery is working on is local malt. We brewed a lot of beer with local malt that's grown in Missouri, and we're sending it out to Colorado right now to have it malted and roasted, and then bringing it back and making beer out of it. And again, it was another year that was really tragic for that, so we kind of didn't do so much of that this year, but the year before we did tons of it. And that's really our future, is using the terroir of the land to grow barley, and then, you know, if we can really do our work and really figure out how to grow hops, hopefully start throwing some of that in there too. But my focus is really on the barley aspect of it. So as you see us grow in the future and as you see us progress forward, there'll be a focus on that for us as well. But I'm so thankful for everybody coming in tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the beers. Hope you look for us on tap and tell your bartenders how much you enjoy it. And look forward to meeting all of you guys in the 5 seconds we have after this is over.